You're listening to Informed America Radio, pushing back the frontiers of ignorance 24/7. Now, the Teri O'Brien Show.
May I have your attention, please?
Here we go. Y'all ready?
It's not about being right in the ideological sense of the word. It's about committing common sense every single day. It's politics, it's pop culture, and it's the news of the day, both serious stuff and the water cooler stuff.
I've never seen such a bunch of petty, bitter, mean-spirited, vindictive people. And I'm really glad, Democrats, I'm really glad that all the serious problems in our country are solved now. And we can focus on being vindictive over this guy who's going to be ambassador to Belgium. That's like the most important problem we have facing our country right now. Way to go, Democrats. This is what I'm saying. My work is never done. We don't need to investigate the motive. As sad as this is, when you put on the red suspenders.
Put on a uniform.
Yeah, you put on the big shoes, you put on the white face and the red nose and the red makeup, the wig, that crazy looking wig, and you go out there and flop around with the big shoes. I'm sorry, I don't want to see anybody hurt, but I have to say, you're an intimidating and frightening presence in the community at that point. And some might say that without even knowing it, you're actually asking for it because you are dressed up as a clown. One thing we always say is the Second Amendment is not about hunting. The Second Amendment is about the right to keep and bear arms to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical. That's what it's about. It's not about being able to go out and shoot bunny rabbits.
Ooh, what a girl. She's always in a whirl, always going new places, seeing new faces, that girl on the go.
Teri O'Brien.
Wonderful girl on the go.
How many visa waiver program overstays are there currently in the United States?
Sorry, I didn't bring that number with me.
Ms. Barisi, when I look at the witness list, you got the longest title. Deputy Assistant Secretary, Screening Coordination, Office of Policy, Department of Homeland Security. You got the longest title, and it says Screening Coordination. Now, what is that? What screening are you coordinating? Is that just intra-agency or is that inter-agency?
It's both.
It's both, so it's all of that.
I could coordinate across DHS components.
And the two biggest issues right now that we're dealing with, we had these terrible tragedies, terrible terrorist attacks, and we're talking about the refugee issue and the visa waiver program issue, and you can't give us any numbers on either program?
So I came prepared to talk about the visa waiver program.
And I just asked you how many visa waiver program overstays are there, and you said you don't know.
Sir, I don't have a number. Visa waiver program.
So when I ask you how many visa overstays of the visa waiver program may have traveled to Syria before they got here, do you know that number?
Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio at a House Oversight Committee hearing last Thursday here on this December 13th, 2015 edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. Welcome one, welcome all. And the person being asked, as you heard there, was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Screening Coordination, Office of Policy of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Kelly Barisi. And we'll hear the answer and we'll hear more. And we'll also hear some of the withering questioning of Ms. Barisi by Trey Gowdy. Later in this edition of the program, we'll also have a Second Amendment update. We also want to talk about election 2016. We have some Sunday show audio, though not a lot of it. And did a police officer in Chicago actually commit first-degree murder? Or is it obvious that he did? And what about Rahm Emanuel? Because he was actually the subject on two Sunday shows this morning on both Meet the Press and This Week on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. He was featured there. We're going to hear more from the official there, Kelly Barisi of the Department of Homeland Security, later in the program, but I think you're getting the idea from the sound of crickets that I played that the Department of Homeland Security seems to have no clue what is going on with the visa waiver program. And as if we didn't know that, now the visa waiver, well, let me spit it out in English. The visa waiver program is separate and apart from the K-1 visa, made notorious by Tashfeen Malik, one of the two San Bernardino jihadists. The New York Times reporting today, headline, U.S. visa process missed San Bernardino wife's zealotry on social media. And what this story is about, and actually it's a story from yesterday, but I'll read just the beginning. Tashfeen Malik, who with her husband carried out the massacre in San Bernardino, California, passed 3 background checks by American immigration officials as she moved to the U.S. from Pakistan. Or do you say Pakistan? I think that's how Obama says it. None uncovered what Ms. Malik had made little effort to hide, that she openly talked on social media about her views on violent jihad. She said she supported it, and she said she wanted to be part of it. American law enforcement officials said they recently discovered those old and previously unreported postings as they pieced together the lives of Ms. Malik and her husband, Syed Rizwan Farouk, trying to understand how they pulled off the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil since September 11th, 2001. Had the authorities found those posts years ago, they might have kept her out of the country. But immigration officials do not routinely review social media as part of their background checks. And there is debate inside the Department of Homeland Security over whether it is even appropriate to do so. Oh, yeah, because you wouldn't want to violate the privacy of somebody that is determined to come into the country and murder innocent people for their desire to be part of the jihad. I submit to you that, they claim in this story, they say tens of millions of people are cleared each year to come to this country to work, visit, or live. It is impossible to conduct an exhaustive investigation and scour the social media accounts of each of them, law enforcement officials say. And I think that's probably true. But to me, that's just an argument for having a freeze on granting these visas, particularly to people from countries that are jihadist hotbeds. And we talked on last week's program about the fact that Rand Paul had introduced an amendment last week or the week before that would have suspended visas to people from 30 countries, actually more like 38 countries, that are hotbeds of jihadism. And disappointingly, I showed you guys last week, Marco Rubio voted against that. Ted Cruz voted for it. Mike Lee, of course, voted for it. There were like 10 Republicans that did vote for it. You can look in the show notes from last week's program. If you go to TeriO'Brien.com, TeriO'Brien.com, just like my cousin Conan, you can actually see links to all the articles we discussed. Also, I have noticed that sometimes on the program, I don't always get to everything that I say I'm going to get to. And that's just because there is so much stuff to talk about today. In the next 13 months, as you guys know, are going to be very challenging. And I think we can get through it together, get through the darkness together, but we have to stay informed and we have to stay strong and courageous. And that's what I'm here for, to help you stay and be the most informed citizen that you can be by reporting on the illegal alien crime spree, the refugee invasion, and all the other things that we've been talking about over the last year. But things I don't get to, I do put at TeriO'Brien.com. Now, if you make a monthly gift to the show, and by monthly gift, I'm talking like $5 a month, less than you spend at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts when you go in to get your cup of coffee, you get special show notes with added stuff in the subscriber pile and a link to a show without any breaks. So you can just listen to it, 45 minutes instead of an hour, right? So please consider doing that, or please consider visiting TeriO'Brien.com and dropping a few pennies in the tip jar. And thanks to those of you who've done that to help us keep the lights on. And I know it's a tough economy, and I know everyone's trying to get through the holidays. And so if you are not able to contribute to help us keep the lights on, you can still help us by doing your Amazon shopping, starting at TeriO'Brien.com. We have a gold box deals banner along the top of the page, and that's where you can actually start your shopping. And if you don't see that, it could be because you have an ad blocker in your web browser. But even if you have that, you should still be able to see the links in the right sidebar. So thanks to all of you who have done that. So, yeah, I think the fact that they're claiming that they don't have the resources to adequately screen these people by looking at their social media accounts means that all the folks who are saying, including Donald Trump, that we need to have a pause on these visas are absolutely correct. Now, I've said before, and I've said here, I've said at TeriO'Brien.com, I've said at my various social media sites, I would not have proposed what Donald Trump proposed. I would not say no Muslims in the country, not because it's unconstitutional, Jake Tapper. It's nothing of the sort. And I have a post at TeriO'Brien.com explaining that it's not unconstitutional and citing various Supreme Court cases and federal statutes that make it very clear it's not unconstitutional, it's not illegal, there's no constitutional right to come into this country as an illegal alien. Has nothing to do with the First Amendment, has nothing to do with the religious tests, which is part of Article 6, I believe, of the Constitution. I don't have my Constitution in front of me, but that applies to office holders of the United States not being subject to a religious test. It has nothing to do with illegals or refugees or, any of the things these pinheads on TV are trying to tell you it has to do with. Yeah, and I'm looking at you, Jake Tapper, and a bunch of other people in the media. But, that said, I think it makes more sense rather than to try to ascertain a person's religion. I just don't think it's practical to be able to figure out what religion someone is. I think it makes a lot more sense, and for administrative convenience, to say, okay, there's 30-some countries, between 30 and 40, that are notorious hotbeds of Islamic radicalism and jihadism, and I think that's where we should put our efforts. And it's very disappointing to see members of the Republican Party vote against that amendment that Rand Paul offered. So back to this New York Times liberal Death Star story. Ms. Malik faced 3 extensive national security and criminal background screenings. Yeah, very extensive. First, Homeland Security officials checked her name against American law enforcement and national security databases. Then her visa application went to the State Department, which checked her fingerprints against other databases. Finally, after coming to the U.S. and formally marrying Mr. Farouk here, she applied for a green card and received another round of criminal and security checks. Ms. Malik also had 2 in-person interviews, federal officials said. The first by a consular officer in Pakistan, the second by an immigration officer in the U.S. when she applied for a green card. Now, notice this application goes to the State Department, which brings me to the subject of Lurch. John Kerry, our wonderful Secretary of State, who possibly could be even worse than Hillary as a Secretary of State. And I didn't grab the audio because as I keep telling you guys, a lot of this audio of Lurch and Hillary and Obama, it's torture. It's torture for me, and I know it's torture for you. So I'll just tell you that he was doing several of the Sunday shows. I think he was on 3 of them to talk about this moronic climate change deal that he participated in, that he's all excited about. But in at least 2 of those interviews, he talked about how we have great vetting and great screening for people who want to enter the country. And so I guess he thinks State Department is doing just fine. We can't ask one of those 14 murdered people in San Bernardino, because they're dead as a result of people entering the country who had no business being here. But he thinks it was just fantastic. I'm not going to say a lot about this climate thing, but I do have a little to say about it, which I hope to get to briefly. So Ms. Malik had all these interviews, and of course, as part of this process, they don't look into the person in the United States that the K-1 applicant, the fiance, wants to marry. So it's strictly limited to the person being seeking entry into the country. Now, because, the FBI has said that Mr. Farouk was actually in contact with some folks that they were watching. Now, possibly, if they had kept an eye on him and made that part of the screening process, possibly she wouldn't have gotten into the country. And, of course, you guys also know that one of the folks that was in the Department of Homeland Security, and I'll find the story here in the pile. I know a lot of you have probably seen the story about the gentleman who actually believes that his program that the Obama regime terminated could have actually prevented this attack. And I know he was on Fox News earlier in the week. I didn't see the interview, but the story is a Daily Mail story, naturally. So I will dig that out, and I can share with you what he had to say. Let me see if I can find it here in the pile. I know it's not appearing here immediately, so I will see if I can dig it up. And also coming up on the program, this is good. I just noticed this in the pile also. We have some audio from a liberal feminist who has come out with a book condemning Sharia law, condemning political correctness. So we'll hear some of that audio. It's pretty fascinating, and actually it's sort of more fascinating that more people have not taken that same approach and condemned Sharia and condemned the idea of letting radical Islamists establish a beachhead in the country, because, as we always point out, don't these radical feminists and militant homosexual activists realize where they're headed? And, by headed, no pun intended, and they'll be lucky if they still have their heads if the Islamists take over in this country. And apparently one of them has finally figured it out. So we'll hear from her later in the program, but more about this Tashfeen Malik. Another thing that is really interesting is how often in these terror attacks where in the country that involve foreigners, when the investigation takes place, it turns out there's marriage fraud involved. And this is another example, this case, because Farouk's friend, Enrique Marquez, who I guess right now is in FBI custody, they won't confirm it, but he's probably in a hotel somewhere, sort of like that guy in The Godfather. Remember when he was going to drop a dime on Michael Corleone, but then he ended up killing himself? Remember how he was, before he testified, he was in that motel with the FBI agents? That's how I picture Mr. Marquez. But he's the guy who acquired the weapons for his friend, Mr. Farouk. He was, by the way, also a licensed security guard. Did you guys know that? Yeah. He married a Russian woman named Tatiana, which, I know some of you are thinking that sounds like a stripper name, which it does. But that she was a visa overstay, apparently. And her sister is married to Farouk's brother, whose name is also Syed, which, as I said last week, can't these people afford separate names for their kids? Syed Rahil Farouk. But apparently, according to people that live near Mr. Marquez, he lives with his girlfriend, and they've never seen a wife. So this whole thing, it sounds like another fraudulent thing. This whole marriage-based category was supposed to be reformed. And after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security did seek to reform it. But after Obama took office, apparently, these audits of fraud were shut down because, of course, Obama's objective is to get as many illegals and third world uneducated, low-skilled people in the country who can be future Democrat voters and be dependent on government as possible. So, national security, be damned, it does not matter. So I think that all of this leads up to a story that is very distressing about something that we've been talking about on this program for months and months, and that is this Obama plan to bring in all of these refugees from Syria. So far, 97% of the ones brought in have been Muslim. So I guess, I was under the impression that Christians were being persecuted and that religious persecution is sort of part of the definition of being a refugee. But apparently, like every other word that liberals get their hands on, the meaning can fluctuate depending on what is in their expedient political interest at the time. But there's a very disturbing story. So you guys know, I told, and I've been imploring you, begging you to contact your representatives. And I've given you information at terryobrien.com that you need the phone numbers. I've got a sample letter there that you can use to contact your representatives to tell them that you want this refugee resettlement that Obama wants defunded. And that's the only way to stop it. This SAFE Act that they passed a couple weeks ago that Paul Ryan got through Congress, it's really just a show. It's all for show. It's kabuki theater. The only thing that will stop Obama's plan to resettle a lot of Syrians in this country is to defund it. So you guys know that last Friday was the deadline. They were supposed to pass a budget to fund the government. They ended up passing a 5-day resolution through Wednesday. So now apparently, according to reports, there's a report on Fox News that says that Paul Ryan is getting ready to give Barack Obama a blank check to resettle all these refugees in the country. They're planning, according to this fellow over at Fox News, Chad Program. You've probably seen him. He's a producer, but sometimes he's on the air. He says the House Republicans are gearing up to attach a proposal to the budget bill that, according to Jeff Sessions, who I think we can trust on this issue, and others who agree with Jeff Sessions that this refugee resettlement in this country is a really bad idea, that this attachment is going to empower Obama to bring in an unlimited number of refugees. And they're going to put some phony language in here about bolstering a review of the Syrian and Iraqi refugees, some sort of a feel-good thing to make everybody think that they're actually doing something that we want them to do. But in fact, that's not going to stop the importation of refugees from countries, Syria or Iraq, because if you don't defund it, it's not going to stop it. But it also completely ignores refugees from all these other countries that have sent terrorists to the United States. What about Bosnia? What about Uzbekistan? Can you say Tsarnaev? So, I think that supposedly this is going to be announced tomorrow. I think that we need to keep the pressure on. I'll put the link in the show notes to this piece from Chad Program, and the headline is, with the omnibus spending bill still incomplete, Congress hopes to avoid another December to remember, talking about the government shutdown idea. But the part that is interesting to you and me is the part about giving Obama a blank check on these refugees. So more about that probably as the program unfolds. Also, Second Amendment update. Also, what else do I have here in the pile? I could talk about the illegal alien crime spree that is still continuing. Of course, I chronicle that every day at terryobrien.com, which if you aren't going there, why not? You're missing out. Miss a day and you miss a lot. So come back on the other side of this break and I will be right back, as always.
This is Cheryl Atkinson, and you're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
I'm a good person. I never bothered anybody. But I can't afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I live in a government high-rise. Gangbangers and drug dealers walk down our halls every day. My neighbors and I were scared. We called the police, but they can't keep us safe. Some of us are too afraid to even leave our apartments. But the housing authority told me if I bought a gun to protect myself, they'd throw me to the streets. If I'm not free because of my address today, what makes you think you'll be free tomorrow? I marched behind Martin Luther King at Selma. I know my rights. Now I have my gun. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Where do you want to go to lunch? I'm having a stroke. Did you hear what I said? I'm having a stroke. Why aren't you answering me? I'm having a stroke.
What's up with your face?
I'm having a stroke.
That's not normal. Is something wrong?
I'm having a stroke.
Are you having an allergic reaction?
I'm having a stroke.
When someone is having a stroke, they may not be able to say it with words, but their body language will tell you loud and clear.
I'm having a stroke.
You just need to know the sudden signs. Look for FAST, F-A-S-T, F, face drooping, A, arm weakness, or S, speech difficulty, then T, time. Time to call 911 immediately, because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Know the sudden signs. Face, arm, speech, time. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
So, I'm a dog, and I'm kind of new to this family, but I've noticed a trend. My humans do this thing where they go around and get all my toys and hide them in this basket, but it's always the same basket, and it's always the same place, and then they act so surprised when I find them, but I'm like, hello, that's where you put it last time. Humans are the worst at hide and go seek.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
All right, listen up, maggots, because I have something to say that you might want to hear. It's for every man 18 through 25 years old. Now, you want to live in my United States of America? Then you have got to register with Selective Service. It's a privilege, and it's the law. The fact is, you must register before you can qualify for student loans, most federal jobs, or job training. Now, you say you want to be a U.S. citizen? Well, get with the program. You've got to be registered to qualify. Now, Charlie tells me that we need to go online at sss.gov or fill out a Selective Service registration form at any post office. You did that already? Outstanding! You've earned my respect. Hoorah!
Register with Selective Service online at sss.gov or at the post office.
It's the law.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
At highway speeds, the average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. That's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts. StopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Informed America Radio. Do you want to help the Terry O'Brien Show stay on the air? It's simple. Just start your Amazon.com shopping at TerryO'Brien.com by clicking on the Amazon Gold Box Editors Picks banner at the top of the page. That's TerioBrien.com. Then the show will get a small percentage of what you spend at no additional cost to you. It's a win-win. Terry, producer Thomas, and the K9 associate producers thank you very much. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Thomas Jefferson. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
Terry's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, is available on Amazon.com, Smashwords.com, and the iBook store. Get yours today.
She's like a fist inside a velvet glove, softly shattering left-wing stupidity. The Terry O'Brien Show, proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network.
Red State Talk Radio.
The Talk Monster.
Ready for more hot girl on government action? The Terry O'Brien Show.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Live in vivid red, white, and blue. Every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time. Or on demand, anytime, at TerryO'Brien.com.
Kidding the news, kidding the news, kidding the news, kidding the news. What's the news?
Oh, yeah. This is the theme song of the comedy Google Hangout that I participate in every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with my two comedian friends, Tim Slagle and Dale Irvin. And actually here on Informed America Radio, we are going to start posting there the Kidders podcast. We'll start posting it next week. And you can, it's like 10 to 15 minutes, and we just take wacky stories and we mock them. And who couldn't use a little comedy? Actually, you know, I needed to have some comedy. I mean, with all this other stuff I'm trying to deal with, I was starting to maybe get a little, I don't know, depressed. Is that possible? I'm not a depressive type, but it is difficult with all the things that are going on not to become depressed. So the Kidders is me, Tim, and Dale. And, you know, they're professional comedians. I'm there really to provide adult supervision, and I think it will make you laugh. So check it out. Tuesday, it streams live at Dale Irvin a YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and go Dale Irvin, and it streams live on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. But I'm going to put the actual audio at Informed America Radio. If you want the video, that's where you go and watch the Hangout. So check it out. I think you will laugh. Now here's a Daily Mail story about the guy that claims that his program could have stopped the San Bernardino attack. He is a whistleblower named Phil Haney. And here's the story by Chris Pleasance for the Daily Mail from last Thursday. A founding member of Department of Homeland Security says a database he spent years creating could have helped stop the San Bernardino terror attack before it was destroyed by federal officials. Phil Haney, who investigated terror groups in the wake of 9/11, claims he investigated two groups with links to terror killers Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik as far back as 2012. If he had been allowed to continue his probe, he claims, it would have flagged the pair to the security services and may have stopped them from killing 14 people and injuring 21 in California last week. However, he says the government's civil rights officials destroyed the information he collected over fears he was unfairly profiling Muslims, investigated him and then stripped him of his security clearance. So that's what he claims. Now, you know, who knows? There could be more to this. He could be a disgruntled employee, but he claims, he was considered a valued employee. He was given an award for identifying more than 300 potential terrorists with links to these various Islamist groups. And so I don't doubt that the current regime is all about political correctness. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, I think all we have to do is look at their statements, the statements of Loretta Lynch. What did she say? Loretta Lynch said that she was going to be on the lookout for anybody committing hate speech against Muslims in the wake of this brutal massacre. That was her number one concern. And then, I didn't want to talk about that train wreck of a speech from Obama last Sunday. One of the big takeaways from that was, be nice to Muslims and let's have more gun control. That's pretty much the whole thing. So, I don't doubt. This guy's story is very plausible in my opinion. And it is an example of what you get when you vote for a radical leftist who has a chip on his shoulder about America and is looking for payback. Okay, let's get into some of these sound bites because we're going to run out of time and we're not going to get to play them all. From this oversight hearing last week in Congress featuring Trey Gowdy, and Jim Jordan. Actually, there are a variety of people who actually question, but I didn't grab audio from all of them because, we would have had to have like a 4-hour show. I know some of you would like a 4-hour show, but let's see. Which ones do I want to get into the pile here? Yeah, we'll talk about the no-fly list when we get into the Second Amendment update because that is where we want to talk about that. But we did hear in the show open, we heard Jim Jordan of Ohio ask this Kelly Barisi, who is an official with the Department of Homeland Security. Let me give you her official title. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Screening, Coordination, Office of Policy of the United States Department of Homeland Security. She was up there on Thursday. He asked her how many visa overstays there are, and she really didn't know the answer. Let's hear some of the things that she had to say.
How many visa waiver program overstays are there currently in the United States?
Sorry, I didn't bring that number with me.
Ms. Barisi, when I look at the witness list, you got the longest title. Deputy Assistant Secretary, Screening Coordination, Office of Policy, Department of Homeland Security. You got the longest title, and it says Screening Coordination. Now, what is that? What screening are you coordinating? Is that just intra-agency or is that inter-agency?
It's both.
It's both, so it's all that.
I could coordinate cross DHS components.
And the two biggest issues right now that we're dealing with, we had these terrible tragedies, terrible terrorist attacks, and we're talking about the refugee issue and the visa waiver program issue, and you can't give us any numbers on either program?
So I came prepared to talk about the visa waiver program.
And I just asked you how many visa waiver program overstays are there, and you said you don't know.
Sir, I don't have a number. Visa waiver program.
So when I ask you how many visa overstays of the visa waiver program may have traveled to Syria before they got here, do you know that number?
Sir, if visa waiver program national has a citizen of a visa waiver program country has traveled to Syria, Iraq, or a conflict zone, and they're considered a foreign fighter, that VW.
I'm not asking that. I'm saying someone from Great Britain. Someone from Great Britain comes to the United States on a visa waiver program, and they're now on overstay. Do we know if that person who's here today? Maybe they're not even overstay. Do we know if that person has been to Syria before they came to the United States? Do we know that? I mean, I know this is what our bill that we just passed earlier this week is trying to get to. I'm asking, do we know that fact or that information now?
So that's why we have the IC involved, and there's an intelligence assessments, and we use. I
wasn't asking that. Do we know that? Do you know the number?
I don't know the number, but that's why I'm trying to.
But do we have people who are in that category I just described? Come from a visa waiver program country, may have traveled, they're here today, and may have been in Syria or Iraq or somewhere there in the last before they came here. Do we know
If
that?
a citizen of a VWP country has traveled to one of those areas, there's a nexus to the United States, or the VWP partners shared that information with us. Yes, we know that information, and we will vet against it. We will also use
But
our
could they be
algorithms
here
in the
right
background
now?
for
Could they be here right now is my question.
I don't have that answer, sir.
Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, questioning Kelly Barisi, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Screening Coordination, Office of Policy of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, in an oversight hearing last Thursday here on the Teri O'Brien Show. So does she really know anything? Representative Jordan wanted to know if she could answer any questions.
All right, well, how about, can you tell me anything about the no-fly list then? You can't tell me anything about those. How does a person get put on the criteria for that? Can you tell me anything about that?
Sure. The no-fly list is a subset of the overall terrorist screening database. The interagency works together. The terrorist screening database is owned and operated by the Terrorist Screening Center, as I said earlier. There are criteria to get on that are.
How many American citizens are on that list right now? Can you give me that number? How many American citizens are on the no-fly list right now?
I know there are American citizens on the list. It is an extremely small number, but I don't have my numbers with me. But again, that's something I can easily get back to you.
Ms. Barisi, I've asked you the number of Americans who've traveled to Syria, you don't know. The number of Americans who may have traveled and returned, you don't know. The number of Syrian refugees who've entered the country in the last year, you don't know. The number of visa waiver program overstays, you don't know. The number of visa waiver overstays who may have been to Syria before they came here, you don't know. And the number of American citizens on the no-fly list, and you don't know. And yet you are the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Screening Coordination, Office of Policy, Department of Homeland Security, in front of the Oversight Committee, and you can't give us one single number to some, I think, pretty basic questions?
Some of those statistics aren't held by DHS, and so that's why I would like to work with my interagency.
That's why I referenced your title. You're the one who's the screening coordinator for all this, and you said you were interagency. That's why I referenced your title. Seems to me you should, when you come from this space, you have that information.
Employee. I'm a DHS career civil servant employee, and I will work with my interagency partners. But they're the authoritative source for a lot of those numbers that you mentioned.
If you could get us those numbers and the ones Mr. Russell asked for, that would be very helpful. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio questioning Kelly Barisi of the Department of Homeland Security during an oversight hearing last week here on the Teri O'Brien Show. So basically, this woman knows nothing, the number of Americans who traveled and returned to Syria, the number of Syrian refugees who entered the country in the last year, the number of visa waiver program overstays, the number of visa waiver overstays who may have been to Syria before they came here, number of Americans on the no-fly list. I mean, it goes on and on. Pretty much never ends. You can certainly see why these federal bureaucrats have these wonderful cushy jobs, can't you? Yeah. Okay, so Trey Gowdy, I don't know if I want to get into, I do want to get into Trey Gowdy, but I did want to save what he had to say for the Second Amendment update, which is coming up. But first, I did want to mention, do you know how many Department of Homeland Security employees are currently on the terrorist watch list? At least according to one congressman who happens to be a Democrat. Stephen Lynch is a Democrat from Massachusetts, and he says that a congressional investigation recently found that at least 72 people working at DHS were also on the terrorist watch list. He says, and this is a story from the Washington Free Beacon, back in August, we did an investigation, the Inspector General did, of the Department of Homeland Security, and they had 72 individuals that were on the terrorist watch list that were currently working at the Department of Homeland Security. The former DHS director had to resign because of that, he said. DHS continues to fail inspections aimed at determining the efficiency of its internal safety mechanisms, as well as its efforts to protect the nation. Lynch referred to a recent report that found the Transportation Security Administration, which is overseen by DHS, failed to stop 95% of those who attempted to bring restrictive items past airport security. So 95% failure rate. And, you guys all seen the stories. They have people strap guns to their ankles and put, cannonballs with lit fuses inside their luggage. And, it gets right through security. So that's what could possibly go wrong with letting more Syrian Muslims into the country? I'm serious, you guys. We have to tomorrow continue our campaign to put the kibosh on this. I think I told you guys last week that I contacted my congressman back in September, actually, to tell him that I wanted him to sponsor Representative Babin's legislation that was introduced in July that would defund this refugee resettlement. And the similar language is what we want to see put into this budget bill, which Paul Ryan does not want to do, which is why we have to call his office. But anyway, my congressman sent me something that absolutely infuriated me as a response, which was very insulting. It was a letter that basically said, an email actually, that said, you have nothing to worry about because back in 2005, the Congress passed the Real ID Act. And as I told his staffer on the phone, no state in the country enforces the so-called Real ID Act. And if they did, none of these states could be issuing driver's licenses to illegal aliens. So, you may get the same thing when you try to contact your congressman about this. So don't be at all surprised if you do, but don't fall for it. Speaking of illegal aliens and the crime spree, this is a good one. Our friends at Judicial Watch had a release here on the illegal aliens who are suing. They've had a federal lawsuit in Oregon. You know what they're suing? They're saying that denying them driver's licenses is discriminatory because it's based on membership in a, quote, disfavored minority group, unquote. Yeah, people who are breaking our immigration laws. So you guys probably remember, maybe you don't, because I don't think it was huge news, but about a year ago, the state of Oregon had a referendum. And the people of Oregon overwhelmingly voted against something called Measure 88, which would have given driver's licenses to illegals. And so this state, by the way, Oregon is a pretty liberal state, thanks to the influx of all these Californians. But these voters in this blue state, they rejected this. The vote was 983,576 to 506,751. So basically 2-1, right? And all 36 of Oregon's counties voted against Measure 88, which would have given driver's licenses to illegals. So, and the reason they had this referendum was because the legislature, which I'm sure is a Democrat legislature, back in 2013 passed a law that would give illegals driver's licenses if they had been there more than a year. So after this passed, we've got a group of 5 Mexicans identified only by their initials in court documents suing the state for violating their civil rights by denying them driver's licenses. Now, this is how insane we have become in this country. 2 immigrant rights groups, which in itself to me is an oxymoron, but called Familias en Acción and Los Niños Cuentan. Okay, so Families in Action and Children Count, have joined the Mexican illegals as plaintiffs in this case. They accuse Oregon officials of violating the U.S. Constitution by arbitrarily denying them and other illegal immigrants driving privileges simply because they belong to a disliked minority group. Measure 88 was, quote, motivated in substantial part by animus toward persons from Mexico and Central America, unquote, the lawsuit says, further stating that the ballot initiative was, quote, an improper attempt by the state of Oregon to regulate immigration, unquote. Just like the state of Arizona, when they tried to actually have the immigration laws enforced, and the federal government came down on them like a house of cards. Never mind that California can have all the immigration ideas they want, including all their sanctuary cities. Oh, and by the way, mentioning this defunding of this refugee resettlement, as Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, who's just been magnificent on this issue of illegal immigration and refugee resettlement, points out, the other thing that is going to be funded by this budget, if we don't stop it, is sanctuary cities. There's no cutting off of the funding for sanctuary cities. So if you want to try to stop this, you can. I don't think we should take the position that just because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and all these guys are amnesty, open borders guys, establishment rhino types, that we should just sit back and let them do what they want. That's a huge mistake. You should make your voice heard. It doesn't take that long to make a phone call or send an email, and you definitely should be contacting your congressman. My congressman is a Democrat. I don't care. I contacted him anyway. They're up for re-election every 2 years, and when I contacted my congressman's office to tell him how angry I was about this insulting email he sent me referencing the Real ID Act, which is not enforced at all and has no impact whatsoever. I said, I'd rather the congressman, rather than insult my intelligence, just say, hey, lady, I don't agree with you. I think we should let as many Syrian Muslims in the country as possible. And, if we have more San Bernardinos as a result, that's just the price of proving we're a compassionate country. I mean, I definitely would have preferred that. So anyway, I urge you tomorrow, Monday, because this budget thing is going to be voted on the next couple of days. And I have a feeling that part of the reason they didn't make a deal, even though Ryan and Pelosi are trying to make a deal, is in large measure because of this refugee resettlement thing and the sanctuary cities. And I think we have a great opportunity here to hold their feet to the fire. So I will put at TeriO'Brien.com again information that you need in terms of how to find out who your congressman is if you don't know. And even some members of this audience might not know. I think most of you do, but life is very hectic. So we'll put that in. And also links to where you can find the sample letter with information that you can use, and you can doctor it up to make it sound however you want to write to your congressman. Okay, so let's see. We got our Second Amendment update coming up. I want to talk briefly about the climate thing. Not a lot, because frankly, I'm pretty bored with that story. I have some Sunday show audio. And did a Chicago police officer actually obviously commit first-degree murder? Some people would have you believe that that's true. We'll find out on the other side here on the Teri O'Brien Show.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter. The address is @TeriO'Brien. TeriO'Brien. That's OBRIEN, spelled just like Terry's cousin, Conan. Thanks for your encouragement and support.
America's wounded warriors are coming home. After serving on foreign shores, these brave men and women are returning to their families and communities. Many have wounds you can see, and many have wounds you can't see, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Now that these warriors are back home, they are ready to enter the civilian workforce. To help, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps warriors translate their military experience to the civilian workplace. These extraordinary men and women bring proven world-class job skills and a unique perspective on teamwork to the job. And to ensure the right warrior finds the right job, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right match. When you hire a wounded warrior, you hire an intelligent, talented, and committed new employee. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
A farmer that was driving his horse and wagon to town for a load of grain had a head-on collision with an automobile. He was lying there seriously injured. Even some of them were permanent disabilities. And later followed the usual legal procedures with the insurance company and all, and he was on the stand, and a lawyer said to him, while you were lying there at the scene of the accident, didn't someone come up to you and ask you how you were feeling, and didn't you answer that you never felt better in your life? Well, he said, yes, I remember that happening. Well, later on redirect, another lawyer was asking the question, and he said, what were the circumstances when you gave that answer as to how you felt? Well, he said, I was lying there, and he said a car came up and a deputy sheriff got out. He said, my horse was neighing with pain and kicking. He had 2 broken legs. The deputy sheriff put the gun in his ear and put the horse out of his misery. He said, my dog had a broken back and was whining with pain, and he went over, did the same thing, put there and shot him. And then he came over to me and said, now, how are you feeling?
This week's episode, Rattlesnake at the Pond.
Oh, Johnny, skipping rocks at the pond sure is fun. Hey, look, a moving stick. That ain't a stick. That's a rattlesnake. Sassy, we're in danger. Good idea, Sassy. Go get Mr. Gunderson. You will in a second, but first you'd like to tell us something we may not know about animal shelters in the United States? It's getting close, Sassy! Approximately 8 million pets enter shelters each year? The majority of which are in shelters because of owner-related issues that the animals have no control over? Sassy the rattlesnake! Save us, Sassy! What, Sassy? You wish you were videotaping this? Sassy!
Sassy is brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org. Remember, adopt.
Dave, what are you doing?
Just sending a gift to Dave 2037.
Who?
Me in the future. I save a little money from every paycheck as a gift to Dave 2037, so he can spend it on things like anti-gravity boots or a hologram Doberman, something cool like that. I think Dave 2037 deserves it. He worked hard. What are you getting Steve 2037?
I guess I was thinking Steve 2037 would just fend for himself.
Well, all right, but don't expect to be borrowing my anti-gravity boots.
You want to have money in your future? You got to start saving now. Putting some money from every paycheck into a savings account or contributing to your 401k can make a big difference later. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ideas and easy ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
Hey, let's just hope Steve 2037 doesn't get his hands on a cool time machine, because he is going to come back here and knock some sense into you.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Broadcasting from a secured bunker in an undisclosed location in flyover country, outside the East Coast bubble and far from left coast insanity. You're listening to America's original warrior princess, Teri O'Brien. Learn more at TeriO'Brien.com.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U.
Here's what insightful and gifted writer Ginny DeAngelis of American Thinker and Breitbart fame says about Teri O'Brien's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America. In the book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, Teri O'Brien illustrates her brilliance. This lady uses sarcasm like a sword and cuts through the absurdity of America being forced to endure the A to Z disaster who, when he's not on vacation, lives in the White House. The well-researched information doesn't miss one iota of what's gone on for the past 6+ years. Teri weaves hard-hitting facts together with snarkiness and humor. You'll find yourself laughing. Then, as you're giggling, you'll begin to realize that what seemed comical is actually pathetic. Only from Teri could you get a statement like this. Election day, unemployment was 7.9%, which sounded bad to some people, but that didn't matter. It was no match for the awesome power of Barack Obama's radiant, loving energy and his amazing ability to care so much about people, especially the downtrodden, that they could literally feel his long arms warmly hugging them as they watched Judge Judy every afternoon. Read The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America. Trust me, learning the hard truth will be very entertaining. Another reviewer writes, This book was great fun to read and was especially valuable for the links to news reports on each of the topics covered. The fun part stops when you realize what a cumulative disaster Obama's term in office has been. Much of it documented in this book. What say you? Get your copy of the ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America on Amazon.com today for the amazing price of only 99 cents. And let us know what you think by writing to abcs@terryobrien.com or posting your review on Amazon. Thank you for your encouragement and support.
Now I know my ABCs. Aren't you very proud of me?
We just want to say that we're not Spirit Bunnies anymore. We always hated that name. It bugged the heck out of Dina and me. It's just such a put-down. Really. We know you've got a lot of spirit, everybody, right? And we're going to destroy Lincoln next week, all right? You know, it takes a lot of courage to get up here and do something that you know people will make fun of.
Ooh, what a girl. She's always in a whirl.
Always going new places, seeing new faces. That girl on the go.
Teri O'Brien.
Wonderful girl on the go.
You hear a lot of people in the media say, but then, you look at the polls. Can you explain, while you claim that he's making it harder to win, how is he doing so well?
Well, there's about 40% of the Republican primary voter who believes that Obama was born in Kenya as a Muslim. There's just a dislike for President Obama that's visceral. It's almost irrational. I can promise you this. You're not going to win 270 electoral votes if you don't grow the vote with the Hispanic community. When you look at polling, which Mr. Trump's obsessed with, he has the worst numbers of any Republicans with Hispanics by far because he demonizes illegal immigrants, and many of the illegal immigrants have U.S. citizen relatives. So I can promise you Hillary Clinton will clean his clock, that he can't grow this party, that he represents a level of intolerance and sort of cartoon policy that won't sell, but people feel like he's being strong in the face of a weak Obama, that he's going to be decisive, and at the end of the day, most people who are listening to Mr. Trump believe that what he offers us makes us safer. I'm here to tell you that, from my experience, it makes us less safe, and that we're going to lose an election badly if we nominate somebody with Mr. Trump's approach to governance in the country as a whole. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Senator Lindsey Graham, from an interview earlier this week on Boston Herald Radio. I don't know who the interviewer was, but basically saying that if you oppose Obama as a Republican, it's because you hate him. It's not because you hate the war on law enforcement or you hate the enabling of the terror regime in Iran joining the nuclear club, or it's not because you hate the idea of destroying the suburbs. No. It's because you have an irrational, visceral hatred for Barack Obama. Senator Graham, you really need to go away. The only reason you're in there is to cause trouble and to excrement stir against people like Ted Cruz. So you really, you need to go away. And this statement here proves it. More on election 2016 coming up. But first, what's that I hear?
When a man's in trouble or in a good fight, you want all your friends around them, preferably armed.
You can't say Americans are not more violent than other people.
No.
All those people killed in shootings in America?
Oh, shootings. Yes, but that doesn't mean Americans are more violent than other people. We're just better shots.
Believe in a world without guns. That's very sweet, but a little naive.
I swear to uphold and protect the Constitution of these United States. So relax, gun nuts. I can't touch you.
Second Amendment Update, a big feature here on the Teri O'Brien Show, where we are big supporters of the Second Amendment. Now I want to get back to some of that testimony from the hearing last Thursday, the House Oversight hearing featuring the official from the Department of Homeland Security who basically couldn't answer any objective, simple questions about visa overstays or how many people from the United States have traveled to Syria and returned, or any basic stuff that you would think would be very important to understand if you're an official of the Department of Homeland Security. Now I want to focus, though, on the issue of the no-fly list, because as you know, that is the latest Democrat liberal gun grabber hobby horse that we need to make sure that people that are on the no-fly list, as Obama called them, potential terrorists or potential criminals. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, that we have a regime that wants to celebrate, enable, and even pay actual criminals, illegals, but wants to talk about law-abiding Americans as potential criminals. And speaking of paying illegals, just a couple things I want to mention that in case you missed it, TeriO'Brien.com, before we get into the sound bites about the no-fly list. But this story from the Free Beacon about illegals eligible for up to 8 refundable tax credits. You definitely need to go check that story out. I will put it in the show notes. But basically, a refundable tax credit, as I'm sure you know, means that if you don't earn enough or pay enough in taxes to actually get a credit, then you actually get a check from the government. So that's something I wanted you to make sure that you read. And I'll get to the other story I want to mention in a minute after I play you some of these sound bites about the no-fly list, because it's a very important issue. Trey Gowdy was questioning Kelly Barisi, the official from DHS that we heard from earlier. Let's hear him talk about the no-fly list.
Chairman, Ms. Barisi, how many visa overstayers are there in the United States?
Sir, as I said earlier, I don't have that statistic with me.
Well, let's use the president's statistics that there are 11 million and 40% of them would be visa overstayers as opposed to border crossers. Do you take exception with what the president said, or can we just use that as kind of a baseline?
I, in all honesty, don't recall what the president said about it, but I'm not sure where those stats are coming from.
So you cannot tell me how many visa overstayers are in the United States.
I don't have that information with me.
Is there a list?
There is an interim draft entry-exit report with has overstayed data in it.
No. I want. Are there a list of names of visa overstayers?
So anybody who's overstayed, regardless if it's a visa or a visa waiver program, those individuals have final removal orders, and our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency receives that list.
So there's a list?
Yeah.
Is that list shared with federally licensed firearms dealers?
I am not sure.
Kelly Barisi of the Department of Homeland Security asked by Representative Trey Gowdy about the visa overstays. And like everything else, she doesn't seem to have any clue. Well, he wanted to know about prosecutions for buying guns if you're an illegal overstay.
And some of our skepticism when we hear folks calling for a new category of prohibited persons that cannot purchase or possess firearms when we've done such a dreadful job with the current categories. It is currently unlawful, illegal for people who are not legally in the country to purchase or possess firearms. And my question is, how many of those folks have we prosecuted? And the number's really small.
Trey Gowdy at an oversight hearing last week questioning Department of Homeland Security official Kelly Barisi here on the Teri O'Brien Show. Yeah, the number is really small. It's less than 100. So once again, getting back to the idea that the liberals never want to enforce the laws we have on the books. They do a terrible job of even attempting to enforce them. As we hear from this testimony, this official knows virtually nothing, has no clue about the visa overstays, people traveling to jihadist hotbeds. We heard earlier in the program the New York Times story about how this Tashfeen Malik, jihadist bride who's responsible for 14 murdered people in California, made no secret of her desire to become a jihadist. It was all over her accounts, her Facebook accounts. By the way, her sister still has a Facebook account that's mentioned in this Times article. And if you go there, there's a bunch of Islamist garbage on her Facebook account, just FYI. But Trey Gowdy, getting back to this issue of the no-fly list and the fact that it's a complete violation of due process to put someone on a list that the government makes up and decides that you belong for no reason without telling you. He got into that with her regarding the whole issue of Second Amendment rights.
Let me ask you another question about the terrorism list. What process is afforded a U.S. citizen, not someone who's overstayed a visa, not someone who crossed the border without permission, but an American citizen? What process is currently afforded an American citizen before they go on that list?
I'm sorry, there's not a process afforded the citizen prior to getting on the list. There is a process should someone feel they are unduly placed on the list.
Yes, there is. And when I say process, I'm actually using half of the term due process, which is a phrase we find in the Constitution, that you cannot deprive people of certain things without due process. So I understand Mr. Good's idea, which is wait until your right has been taken from you, and then you can petition the government to get it back. I understand that that's his idea. My question is, can you name another constitutional right that we have that is chilled until you find out it's chilled, and then you have to petition the government to get it back? Is that true with the First Amendment?
Sir, there are strict criteria before.
That's not my question, ma'am. That is not my question. My question is, what process is afforded a United States citizen before that person's constitutional right is infringed? Then he's fine with doing it with the Second Amendment. My question is, how about the First? How about we not let them set up a website or a Google account? How about we not let them join the church until they can petition government to get off the list? How about not get a lawyer? How about the Sixth Amendment? How about you can't get a lawyer until you petition the government to get off the list? Or my favorite, how about the Eighth Amendment? We're going to subject you to cruel and unusual punishment until you petition the government to get off the list. Is there another constitutional right that we treat the same way for American citizens that we do the Second Amendment? Can you think of one? Can you think of one?
I don't have an answer for you, sir.
Representative Trey Gowdy making a very masterful case there for the fact that the Second Amendment is treated like the redheaded stepchild of our civil rights to DHS official Kelly Barisi. There's no due process. Oh, by the way, that Mr. Good he keeps referring to is some liberal from the Center for American Progress who apparently wants to have some other list to try to violate your Second Amendment rights, as if we don't have enough already. So in Connecticut, apparently their governor, who is a real dolt, has signed legislation to say that if you are on this no-fly list, you cannot purchase a firearm. I don't know the specifics of the legislation. Seems unconstitutional to me. That's just me, though. Maybe I should ask Jake Tapper or Meghan McCain. Oh, yes, Meghan McCain. She was actually on Fox Business Channel holding forth about how Donald Trump's proposals are unconstitutional, which, as I said in the first hour, they certainly are not. Okay, we need to, I have something to say, not a lot, about this climate thing. I've got the feminist, the liberal feminist with a new book denouncing Sharia law, and also Chicago. So we've got all that coming up in the rest of the Teri O'Brien Show. So stay tuned. I'll be right back.
This is Cheryl Atkinson, and you're listening to the Teri O'Brien Show.
I'm a good person. I never bothered anybody. But I can't afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I live in a government high-rise. Gangbangers and drug dealers walk down our halls every day. My neighbors and I were scared. We called the police. But they can't keep us safe. Some of us are too afraid to even leave our apartments. But the housing authority told me if I bought a gun to protect myself, they throw me to the streets. If I'm not free because of my address today, what makes you think you'll be free tomorrow? I marched behind Martin Luther King at Selma. I know my rights. Now I have my gun. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Where do you want to go to lunch? I'm having a stroke. Did you hear what I said? I'm having a stroke. Why aren't you answering me? I'm having a stroke.
What's up with your face?
I'm having a stroke.
That's not normal. Is something wrong?
I'm having a stroke.
Are you having an allergic reaction?
I'm having a stroke.
When someone is having a stroke, they may not be able to say it with words, but their body language will tell you loud and clear.
I'm having a stroke.
You just need to know the sudden signs. Look for FAST, F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. Or S, speech difficulty. Then T, time. Time to call 911 immediately, because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Know the sudden signs. Face, arm, speech, time. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
So, I'm a dog, and I'm kind of new to this family, but I've noticed a trend. My humans do this thing where they go around and get all my toys and hide them in this basket, but it's always the same basket, and it's always the same place, and then they act so surprised when I find them, but I'm like, hello, that's where you put it last time. Humans are the worst at hide-and-go-seek.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
All right, listen up, maggots, because I have something to say that you might want to hear. It's for every man 18 through 25 years old. Now, you want to live in my United States of America? Then you have got to register with Selective Service. It's a privilege, and it's the law. The fact is, you must register before you can qualify for student loans, most federal jobs, or job training. Now, you say you want to be a U.S. citizen? Well, get with the program. You've got to be registered to qualify. Now, Charlie tells me that we need to go online at sss.gov or fill out a Selective Service registration form at any post office. You did that already? Outstanding! You've earned my respect. Hoorah!
Register with Selective Service online at sss.gov or at the post office.
It's the law.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
At highway speeds, the average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. That's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts. StopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Informed America Radio. Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Martin Luther King. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
Broadcasting from a secured bunker in an undisclosed location in flyover country, outside the East Coast bubble and far from left coast insanity. You're listening to America's original warrior princess, Teri O'Brien. Learn more at TeriO'Brien.com.
Do you want to help the Teri O'Brien Show stay on the air? It's simple. Just start your Amazon.com shopping at TeriO'Brien.com by clicking on the Amazon Gold Box Editors Picks banner at the top of the page. That's TeriO'Brien.com. Then the show will get a small percentage of what you spend at no additional cost to you. It's a win-win. Teri, producer Thomas, and the K9 associate producers thank you very much.
Now let's go to Joy Brighton, a book that also in that canon of top books that you ought to read, hers about Sharia law. Joy is, and by the way, Joy, welcome. By the way, we're going to get to all the callers. We're going to get to all you guys today. Just hang in there. I realize it's tough getting through, but we're going to get to all of you. Joy, here's what was so amazing when I first met you. You're not a right winger. I mean, I would not call you the typical, Breitbart reader or the typical person that comes on Breitbart News, but you know, you came at the same way to kind of understand the Quran of Sharia, and you're a feminist, and your book is amazingly, amazingly powerful. Can you tell our audience how you came as a feminist to this topic, and how did you become such an expert on Sharia law?
Okay, yes, I am a feminist, and I'm an American. Listen, I believe in equal rights for women. I believe in civil rights. I believe in free speech, freedom of religion, and none of this is compatible with Shariaism, which is the political movement of radical Islam, and that's what we need to start calling it, Shariaism. Shariaism is like communism. It's like Nazism. It is a system of total control, and they are justifying their total control on some archaic religious rules called Sharia. And we've got to start, and what my book is all about is it takes 60 American news stories that happened between 2008 and 2014 and separates religion from politics and shows how political correctness in America, exclusively in America, is actually enabling and growing Shariaism.
That is liberal feminist Joy Brighton. We're going to hear more from her in a moment, but I did want to mention one thing briefly. I got something from the Machete of Truth. You guys know about the Machete of Truth show that airs here on Informed America Radio on Wednesday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. A very interesting show last week, all about the Barbary pirates. And, you know, it turns out that Western civilization has been battling radical Islam for quite a long time. But anyway, he sent me something. Apparently, he was at the Paris climate change thing. I don't know about this. I didn't know he was such a world traveler, but he sent me the top 5 reasons the global warming talks adjourned. And if you saw that great adjournment, did you see the Gorbot up there? Oh my God, that was unbelievable. Anyway, number 5, they wanted to get out of Paris before the weather turned cold. Number 4, Al Gore promised to take the top 10 world leaders for a spin in his private jet. Number 3, they had to go home and get in line for Star Wars tickets. Number 2, they thought John Kerry had died and was replaced by a hologram. And the number one reason, I was looking for a drumroll soundbite, but the ones I found were all lame. So I'll just tell you the number one reason: the delegates' cafeteria ran out of caviar. So says the Machete of Truth, fresh from his visit to the Paris climate talks. I'll just tell you, I don't have a lot to say about these climate talks. I will just tell you the real truth, and the goal of this whole thing is that the developed countries, read the U.S., are supposed to pay $100 billion to countries affected by climate change. I think Obama is planning on asking Congress for $3 billion. So it's like, Solyndra writ large. It's like, oh, let's pour some money into another green rat hole, this time internationally. So that's the whole bottom line on the whole thing. Okay. So what have I promised to get to? Oh, I want to get to Chicago, and I've got a couple more stories about illegals and refugees on their unending crime spree in this country. But yeah, let's see. Let me get into this Chicago story, because this morning on 2 of the Sunday shows, the issue of Rahm Emanuel and whether or not he should resign from the office of mayor of Chicago was raised. Now, if you don't know about what's been going on, this all involves the death of a guy named Laquan McDonald, who was shot by police on October 20th, 2014. And recently, one of the police officers involved, Jason Van Dyke, the guy who actually shot him, was charged with first-degree murder after the release of a videotape, a dash cam video, that had been kept sealed for over a year. And a judge finally said it had to be released. And after that happened, all hell broke loose. And we have the Rena-mobs showing up. And I don't doubt, as I keep saying to the husband, how do these protesters in Chicago who are clogging the shopping district and generally causing a lot of trouble, how do they get the time off work? Well, of course, I'm being facetious. They're not off work. That's their actual job. I don't doubt that these are these same Rena-mobs that were in Ferguson, Missouri, and everywhere else. But the case has caused a lot of outrage. The police chief resigned. And so now the question is whether the officer is obviously guilty of first-degree murder. And I have to say to you, the answer is no. And my source for this, and this guy has actually been a guest on the Teri O'Brien Show, Andrew Branca. He is the author of a book called The Law of Self-Defense. He had a piece a couple of weeks ago over at Legal Insurrection called, the headline is Laquan McDonald Video Not Dispositive of Police Criminal Conduct. And I want to share some of the insights he has, because I think that there's been a lot of hysteria, a lot of demagoguery. Obviously, the whole Black Lives Matter, the people that believe in the whole mythology of the hands up, don't shoot, which is something that never happened in Ferguson. These are the folks who are agitating and claiming that this white police officer executed this 17-year-old black youth in cold blood. Mr. Branca says, in fact, based on the available evidence, the dashcam video and the autopsy report, is simply impossible to definitely conclude that Officer Van Dyke committed the crime of murder in the first degree. Indeed, both the video and the autopsy report are entirely consistent with the lawful use of force by Van Dyke. Oh, that sounds sort of intriguing, doesn't it? Let's read on. So Andrew Branca, in this piece at Legal Insurrection, talks about something called the Trueller, Tueller drill. And he writes that he wants to provide some context on the training that the officers get before they use deadly force. He says there is a sentiment being expressed by some that somehow there exists a great disparity in the lethality of a handgun and the lethality of a gun. And for those of you, as Rush would say in Rio Linda, how deadly is it? In fact, he writes, at close quarters, a knife is arguably more lethal than a gun. There's also been expressed the notion that because McDonald, that's the perp, the one who was shot, was not within arm's reach of the police officers, that he presented no imminent deadly threat. This notion is, of course, the result of ignorance, writes Andrew Branca. I expect every police officer in the country has been taught a defensive doctrine called the Tueller drill. The Tueller drill was developed by Salt Lake City police officer Dennis Tueller, who, among other things, was a firearms instructor for his department. Dennis trained uniformed police officers who were armed with pistols and who regularly encountered violent suspects armed with impact weapons, particularly knives. He recognized that a knife wielder standing beside an officer could surely stab that officer before the officer could clear his pistol from his holster and engage the attacker with fired rounds. Dennis also recognized, however, that at some greater distance, an impact weapon-armed attacker would be too far to constitute an imminent threat to the police officer. Absent an imminent threat, the officer would not be justified using deadly force upon the attacker. That begged the question, then, of what distance became the threshold at which an impact weapon-armed attacker did constitute an imminent threat of death or grave bodily harm, such that the officer would be justified in using deadly force. Was it 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet? Dennis knew a pretty good time for an officer to clear his weapon from his holster and strike a target with 2 center mass rounds was about 1.5 seconds. Once that time is known, the question of interest becomes how great a distance an attacker armed with an impact weapon can cross that same 1.5 seconds. Whatever that distance, the aggressor became an imminent threat for self-defense purposes once he crossed that threshold. After running a great many empirical tests, Dennis found that the distance that an impact weapon-armed attacker could cross from a standing start in 1.5 seconds was not just 5 feet or 10 feet or 15 feet. Rather, such an aggressor could consistently cross a distance of 21 feet, a full 7 yards, in the 1.5 seconds that it would take the typical officer to draw his holster and engage that aggressor with arm fire. So it's by no means obvious that this guy did not constitute a threat. Now, it's going to be, the really interesting thing about this case is that getting into the specifics of the case, he was obviously, this guy who was shot, he was obviously being non-compliant with the orders of police officers. Now, that doesn't mean the police have the right to execute someone. As some people have said, the first shot may have been justified, the other 15 shots were not. And I certainly don't think a police officer has the right to execute somebody for violating an order if he's not in fear of his life, or he should not be able to use deadly force. However, keep in mind that this guy was a knife-wielding PCP user running down the street, and the officers, they have an obligation to protect public safety. As Mr. Branca points out, only one person was making a free choice that evening, and that was Laquan McDonald. He chose, as they say, poorly. He also points out that McDonald does not walk directly away from the officers, but rather angles no more than necessary to keep a distance of 10 to 15 feet, typical width of a car length between the officers and himself. That is well within the 21-foot distance that these officers would have been taught as part of their Tueller drill training. So that's another thing. Officers, he says, are taught to to fire at a deadly threat until the threat has been neutralized. Even after McDonald fell to the ground, he was still in control of his movements, and he still possessed the knife. Thus, he was still an imminent threat of death or grave bodily harm to any officer who got close enough. And he finally says, neither I nor the outraged activists can possibly know, based on that dash cam video, whether an officer was close enough to McDonald to be in imminent danger of his knife, because the angle of the dash cam changed such to obscure the entire scene of the incident where police were located. So, this will be in the justice system, and the justice system will work its will. But the one thing that I think is interesting, and the thing that I really think is disgusting and was mentioned this morning on these Sunday shows, is if, as this prosecutor said, now you guys may not know this, but the prosecutor, when these charges against the officer, first-degree murder charges, were filed last month, the prosecutor, Democrat Anita Alvarez, said it was obvious from the video that this officer had committed first-degree murder. And I guess this woman is expecting us to believe that she never saw that video prior to a month ago. And if she did see it right after the incident and didn't charge first-degree murder, then why is she still in office? Why hasn't she been removed? Because, seriously, you're trying to convince us that you didn't see that video? That's absurd. You did. And we know that there was a mayoral election coming up, and we know that Rahm Emanuel was reelected in April. The day after he was reelected, the family of this guy who was killed, and it's a very twisted family tree. I don't know who they figured out to pay this $5 million to, but they paid it to somebody. Hush money, I don't know. It didn't work very well because, I guess the mayor would say it worked just fine because he is still in office. But this morning on This Week, George Will made a great point. He said, this is what you get when you have decades of one-party rule. And there's not been a Republican mayor of the city of Chicago since 1931. This is what you get. I always talk about how, for years I've talked about how Barack Obama's goal is the Cook Countyization of the United States of America. And that's what he'd like to see. A one-party country with a few elites up at the top living large, like he and his repellent wife, and then their cronies in the middle benefiting from their largesse, and then the rest of us, the serfs at the bottom, paying for the whole operation. But this is what you get. And when George Will raised this point, a liberal on the panel there said, well, I don't understand why you would say that. Well, it's obvious, Pinhead. Listen, Brainiac, while I educate you. If there were a Republican prosecutor in Cook County, let's assume that person was only interested in pure, cynical politics. It wouldn't matter. If there were a Republican prosecutor in Cook County, that person would have charged first-degree murder just out of sheer political expediency. Wouldn't have waited until after Rahm Emanuel was reelected. So if for no other reason than to have checks and balances, you want to have something other than one-party government. So it will be interesting to see what happens in this case. Don't expect the pretend news to actually report on any of the specifics like we have talked about here. I will put this article, of course, in the show notes so you guys can read it. Don't get me wrong. I hold no brief for Officer Van Dyke. If, in fact, he did commit murder, I hope that he is convicted and punished. But I don't think that any of the people who are beating their chests and saying they know what happened really know what happened. And I certainly don't think any of the people in this Rent-A-Mob know what happened. Okay, we still have to do some campaign 2016. We, of course, have some Donald Trump audio. He said some amazing, very funny and cool things about Hillary. Also, the liberal feminists lamenting political correctness enabling Sharia law in this country. I'll be right back.
She's America's original conservative warrior princess, daring to fearlessly and, more importantly, cheerfully commit common sense in the age of Obama.
You're different from other girls. That's what you think. You're smarter. You're almost like a man.
You're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
concealed isn't for everyone. It definitely wasn't for me up until a few years ago. My name is Kimberly Weeks, and I can tell you that violent crimes do happen. My apartment in college was fairly close to campus. We were on a ground floor apartment with 3 bedrooms, very safe. When we signed our lease, they said, we have absolutely 0 crime reports that have happened here. It's a very safe neighborhood. In the early morning hours of May 12th, 2006, I was awakened by a stranger who was holding me down with a shirt covering my face. And he was saying, "Shut up. Don't say anything. Just stay quiet." He stayed in my apartment for the next 2 hours and sexually assaulted me. And at 20 years old, I had to lay there thinking about how I was going to die. Law enforcement in my case was fantastic, but they were there after the crime was committed. I would say that my fear of guns disappeared when I got my second chance at my life. Protecting myself is my right. Michael Bloomberg would like to say that he is doing this to make everyone safer. Unfortunately, Michael Bloomberg is not making me safer. If my right to self-protection is taken away, that leaves me very, very vulnerable and feeling very scared once again. I know how best to defend myself. Mr. Bloomberg, you do not have the right to tell me how to defend myself.
Caution to liberals. You will find what you are about to hear extremely offensive, and repeated exposure to the Terry O'Brien Show may result in your being detoxed. Listen at your own risk.
This week's episode, Fire at the Shed.
Gee, Johnny, this rope swing sure is swell. Don't I know it? Hey, it's Sassy. I think she's trying to tell us something. Mr. Gunderson? What about Mr. Gunderson? A fire? Mr. Gunderson's trapped? Where, Sassy, where? What, Sassy? Now that you've got our attention, you'd like to take a moment to talk about shelter pets? Shelter pets in general are well-adjusted, healthy, and love being with people? Sassy, we don't have time! Pets often end up in shelters due to owner problems like divorce or allergies? That's great, Sassy, but what about the fire? There is no fire! You're just messing with our heads? Sassy!
Sassy is brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org. Remember, adopt.
Thanks for asking, but I'd rather not send you nude pictures. I'm camera shy. I already said no. It's against my religion. I'm giving my dog a bath, you can have pictures of that. Pressure gives me hives. Under my clothes, I'm a robot. Hold on, let me ask my mom. Sorry, my webcam is broken. I'm worried they'll get passed around school. Unfortunately, I just had my clothes surgically attached to my body. If they got out, I might never be president. I'm already naked, under my clothes. Not even if you were all 3 Jonas Brothers. I have a rash. I have nudophobia. I have lizard skin. The more you ask, the less I want to. You're not the boss of me. Nudity makes me vomit. I'm a vampire, so I don't show up in pictures anyways. Your badgering has really killed the mood.
When someone is pressuring you to do something you don't want to, how many ways can you say no before they get the message? Let us know at that'snotcool.com. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Teri's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, is available on Amazon.com, Smashwords.com, and the iBooks store. Get yours today.
Ms. O'Brien. O'Brien. She's about as hard right and at least, if not more, articulate than Limbaugh.
Well, she's popular.
There's something about this bitch that's really spectacular.
Yeah, for a popular girl, she's pretty popular.
She's about being sensible.
Well, she can make them talk about themselves, the way it says girls should do in those teenage columns.
Know-it-all, bitch. Basically, I'm in love with her. Enough! Wah!
most of the so-called experts are now saying maybe Trump wins the nomination, but he's still going to get swamped in a general election by Hillary Clinton. And they point to this. Among women, 27% have a favorable view of you, 62% unfavorable. Among blacks...
Here's your problem. Here's your problem.
Can I just read?
No. I think this. You're quoting one poll because there are other polls where I'm very favorable with women.
No, but not among all women.
Excuse me.
We wanted to ask Trump about a USA Today poll last week, which shows him with high unfavorable ratings among women, blacks, and Hispanics.
You released a poll, Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, and I win by 4 points. It's a Fox poll. It's not a Quinnipiac or whoever it is. It's a Fox poll. So Fox and Roger Ailes pays all this money for a Fox poll. In the Fox poll, I beat easily Hillary Clinton. Why don't you talk about that poll?
Trump's right. There was a Fox poll that showed him beating Clinton by 5 points. But it was a month old, not 2 or 3 days. How do you answer the question? Are you too divisive?
No, I think I'm great. Look,
blacks, women?
I think I'll win the Hispanics. I employ thousands of Hispanics. I love them, and I think I'm going to do great with women.
Donald Trump from this morning's Fox News Sunday on the Fox News Channel with Chris Wallace here on the Teri O'Brien Show. Yeah, that unfavorable thing with women, is that married women, single women, registered voters, adults? I'm not really sure. I don't think that these polls of unfavorables, though, are the death knell of anybody's campaign. But it's interesting because he says he'll do great with women, and then he went on to talk about Hillary Clinton.
And I think I'm going to do great with women. And one of the reasons I'm going to do great with women is that I'm a leader. I'm not like Hillary Clinton. She's got no strength. She's got no stamina. Everything she does is like theatrical. Oh, Donald Trump said this. He actually, it's sort of interesting. She said, I watched her last night, Donald Trump, looks like she practices in front of a mirror for 2 hours. Donald Trump said, I think he's dangerous. I'm dangerous. She's the one that caused all this problem. With her stupid policies, you look at what she did with Libya, what she did with Syria. Look at Egypt. What happened with Egypt? A total mess. We don't back any of our allies. You look, she was truly, if not one of the worst Secretary of States in the history of the country. She talks about me being dangerous. She's killed hundreds of thousands of people with her stupidity.
Donald Trump from this morning's Fox News Sunday, talking to Chris Wallace here on the Teri O'Brien Show. Hundreds of thousands of people with her stupidity. Well, I mean, if you consider all the people killed in Libya, Egypt, the Syrian civil war, I mean, I don't think he's necessarily that much off base. She really does have a lot of blood on her hands, if you think about it. And this whole thing where she was on TV last Sunday lying about telling the Benghazi victim families that she never said that the cause of the Benghazi terror attack was a video, that's just an outright lie. And if anything, that October 22nd testimony that she likes to talk about, where I spent 11 hours, that testimony pretty much proves she's a liar. So I'm not sure why she's touting that. But he wasn't finished. He had a little more to say, Mr. Trump, on this morning's Fox News Sunday about, speaking of Benghazi.
What do you mean she's killed hundreds of thousands?
She was Secretary of State. Obama was president. The team,
right.
Two real geniuses.
Killed hundreds.
2 real geniuses. Of course. Look at what happened. The Middle East is a total disaster under her. She traveled back and forth, but look at all the problems. Look at, as an example, Iraq. Total disaster. They didn't get us in, but they got us out badly. Okay? Total. We spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives, wounded warriors all over. Look at Libya. Look at Benghazi, our ambassador. He wired her 500 or 600 times asking for help. She'll take her friend's call every time. Hillary Clinton doesn't have the judgment. She doesn't have the strength or the stamina to be president. She will be a terrible president.
She's America's original conservative warrior princess, daring to fearlessly and, more importantly, cheerfully commit common sense in the age of Obama. You're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Ready for more hot girl on government action? The Teri O'Brien Show.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Live in vivid red, white, and blue. Every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time. Or on demand, anytime, at TeriO'Brien.com.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this December 13th edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. And if you're listening live, I hope you're in the live and lively chat room at TeriO'Brien.com. If you're listening on demand, that's great as well. You can always contact us at the Teri O'Brien Show at gmail.com. Or if you're a premium member, and that is someone who gives a monthly gift to the program, you can actually write to us at a special address, premium at TeriO'Brien.com. We read and respond to all emails to that address. Okay, the feminist, the liberal feminist, Joy Brighton, interviewed on Breitbart Radio about her concerns about Sharia law.
Now let's go to Joy Brien, a book that also in that canon of top books that you ought to read, hers about Sharia law. Joy is, and by the way, Joy, welcome. By the way, we're going to get to all the callers. We're going to get to all you guys today. Just hang in there. I realize it's tough getting through, but we're going to get to all of you. Joy, here's what was so amazing when I first met you. You're not a right winger. I mean, I would not call you the typical, Breitbart reader or the typical person that comes on Breitbart News, but you know, you came at the same way to kind of understand the Quran of Sharia, and you're a feminist, and your book is amazingly, amazingly powerful. Can you tell our audience how you came as a feminist to this topic, and how did you become such an expert on Sharia law?
Okay, yes, I am a feminist, and I'm an American. Listen, I believe in equal rights for women. I believe in civil rights. I believe in free speech, freedom of religion, and none of this is compatible with Shariaism, which is the political movement of radical Islam, and that's what we need to start calling it, Shariaism. Shariaism is like communism. It's like Nazism. It is a system of total control, and they are justifying their total control on some archaic religious rules called Sharia. And we've got to start, and what my book is all about is it takes 60 American news stories that happened between 2008 and 2014 and separates religion from politics and shows how political correctness in America, exclusively in America, is actually enabling and growing Shariaism
in this country. I think she meant to say, or she did say, I cut off the soundbite. Feminist Joy Brien here on the Teri O'Brien Show, and she continued explaining why she believes that Sharia is just a form of control over the population.
The book is called Shariaism is Here, The Battle to Control Women and Everyone Else. It's by Joy Brien. It's a must read. Walk us through, why do you say Shariaism is a form of control?
Well, just very quickly. So if there is a law, a Sharia rule that says if I must not criticize my prophet. Okay, that's a religion. I believe that I must not criticize my prophet. If I say to you, you must not criticize my prophet or I will kill you, that's control. And we have been unable and unwilling to distinguish religion from control. We are way over the line, and the line is a very simple line. The line is called our U.S. Constitution. We believe in individual liberties and freedom of speech, which is being challenged because this is all suddenly hate speech.
Liberal feminist Joy Brien explaining her fear of Sharia law that's being enabled in this country here on the Teri O'Brien Show. I'll put a link to the interview, the whole thing. It's about 8 minutes, and also to where you can get her book. And definitely you're going to want to check that out. Speaking of hate speech, I guess this guy from the Colorado ACLU who tweeted about how he's going to have to shoot Trump supporters before the election. I guess that guy resigned. I can't imagine why. So that's another interesting little election 2016 tidbit. Also, Loretta Sanchez, the liberal from California, congresswoman who is now running for Senate, she is in a little hot water because she's come out the other day. She came out and said between 5 and 20% of Muslims support a caliphate and Sharia. And I guess, after San Bernardino, it's not the worst thing to say, except CARE is pretty upset about it. Anyway, the time has come. Yes, the time when tears are falling all over the planet. But remember, the show never ends at TeriO'Brien.com, and I did mention earlier in the program that we are paying illegals to be in the country. The other story I wanted to mention was one that I posted yesterday about the guardians of these unaccompanied minor children, which, by the way, there's a huge increase in the number of these children who have entered the country this year as opposed to last year. I will link to the story at TeriO'Brien.com, but apparently a large number of these guardians that these children are being released to have criminal records for serious felonies. So I'll put the story at TeriO'Brien.com. It's from a report from Jeff Sessions. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening again. Thanks for posting at TeriO'Brien.com. Thanks for contributing in the tip jar to help us keep the lights on. I'll be back next week. Until then, stay tough because only the strong can stay free.